Tanya, and I'd like to share with you a little bit about myself. You remember that verse in Galatians where Paul writes about the fruit of the Spirit? It's Galatians 5 verse 22, where he refers to joy, love, peace, kindness, long-suffering. Those are just some of the things that I think of now. My life was nothing like that. I was a person that was bitter. I was enraged. I was filled with hate. I was cold. I was unable to forgive. I hated my family. I hated men specifically. And I hated myself. I was broken. I was beaten. But this was due to something in 2015 that happened where I survived an ordeal that didn't physically kill me, but something in me that day died. And when you go through something like that, you'd want to rely on support, which is also not something I had. In 2015, I was raped in my own car by a stranger. Now what happened was I went out with friends that night, and it was a bar, but I was still smoking that time, and I went out to go get my lighter when I saw these two young girls, and I'm assuming they were about 14 thereabouts, if I had to guess them age-wise, that a man had harassed them and they were crying outside. And I thought I'd intervene because I thought of doing a good thing, of taking him away and not have them exposed to that. They shouldn't have been there in the first place, but that's irrelevant. So I took him across the street, away from them. He was drunk, or he appeared to be drunk, and he asked me when I was about to walk away whether I wouldn't give him a lift to his house. And I thought, okay, this is weird. And then I agreed to that, to which I then went back inside, told my friends that I was going to do this, and they were going to drive behind me, which we then drove in a convoy. And at some point I lost them at an intersection where I no longer saw them behind me. And that is when I knew that day would change my life forever. That day I needed to fight to survive, which I did. But something definitely died that day. Surviving something like that makes you a person that goes into the darkness by failing to find a coping method that works, by not having the support that you need, and by not getting the help required, I suppose. To me, it was the same. I became worse, and I say worse by the darkness was inviting, per se, and I became this person that hated. I was enraged all the time. I was unable to forgive. I was unable to see clear. I was lacking direction. I became rebellious. I was bleeding hate, shame and guilt everywhere I went. I became this person that I didn't recognize, and it resulted in me ending up with little to no relationships in my life. In 2015 I fought this case and it was thrown out of court. Then 2016 I fought the case again, and it was thrown out again, up until the point where I met with a lawyer who believed what I told him and then referred me to a prosecutor who then got me to represent my case in 2017. Now, after representing the case in 2017, And I won because he was found guilty and he was sentenced to jail. I was pulled apart in court for 2 days by prosecutors who made me feel like I was the guilty party, and it felt violating. But after that, that's where my spiral started. I started drinking excessively, I suppose, and this was a coping method that my family was not very proud of, and I understand why. It wasn't something pretty to look at. It was dark, and it really wasn't something to be proud of. But this led to about 6 months where I can't remember what I did exactly, but there came a day in June 2017, where I realized that I didn't want to live like this anymore. So I quit drinking and I quit smoking, which I know was not wisdom that came from me because I wasn't thinking rationally. And by stopping that, I had been working for the company that I registered in 2016, which I still work for today. That company became my emotional crutch. And after about a 7-year stint on autopilot, I was sent a few people along the way, 3 men in specific, that shared with me about God. And the first one represented that the coping methods I had employed were no longer serving me, and I would end up dead if I continued like that. The second one was a representative of God's unfailing love that never stopped, that kept on pursuing me, and that didn't quit on me. The third one was a man that represented what an intimate relationship with God looked like, what it meant to be in an intimate relationship with Him. And that resulted in me joining a church that was a support system. There was genuine people were there. They were part of my recovery. That's when my journey started, and this was in 2022, where I realized that we have a responsibility as adults to sort these issues out, but we have to get to the point where we realize that we need help. And my help came from the support structure that a church represented in my life. And by allowing God to work in my life, by allowing Him to change the things that weren't working anymore. Now, He changed my sorrow and my bitterness. He replaced it with joy. He gave me peace when it seemed almost impossible to get. There were moments where I had no one to share my sadness and my sorrow with, where I was crying in my shop one day and I realized how lonely that was. That was when you realize that you are empty and there is literally nothing you can do to change it other than surrender the pain and the hurt and the guilt to a God that never left your side. When you realize that He is the only way out, when you realize that You survived things because He was there. As time passed, I realized I had forgiven a lot of people. The hardest one was forgiving myself. As time passed, I realized that I was okay with letting people come in again. He taught me about self-control in my daily activities. He taught me patience, whilst He was patient with me too. He loved me unconditionally. Cool. My favorite verse in the Bible is Psalm 37 verse 4, which says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart." Now mine was peace, and He has given me that. But I could only find it when I gave my sorrow, my burdens, my hurt, when I gave that to Him. But all of it, He restored me in a way I thought never possible. So I tried different solutions, which included medication and included therapy. But the freedom and the real peace came when I gave it to the Lord. My favorite quote says, "The greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return." And that is the one thing above all else that the Lord has given me back, is the ability to love people again. So we all carry some form of hurt, some form of brokenness, some form of hate and unforgiveness somewhere deep inside. We all carry that. How do we get to the point that we become free of that? We give it to Jesus. He's the only one that can. We have to give it to Him. You see, freedom will come when you surrender that which you hold on to. That's when it will come.